Now that you understand the importance of exit statuses and the ability to use them to test in order to make decisions, although we've yet to actually make use of them within scripts, but at least conceptually you have a good sense for exit statuses purposes, what we should do is show you how to use command chaining as well as command lists. Now you'll find that within a Linux environment as well as within a Unix environment that you often chain together or run multiple disparate commands. So as a result, you end up with long command lines or multiple new lines. So for example, you may find in a script that you need to run, let's say, 20 commands. You have a choice. You have an option. You can either run or you can either input the 20 commands on separate lines, new lines, or run them on the same line. That's called command chaining. The concept is very basic, very simple, and it's a pretty neat way to run your system. Let's open a shell and show you what we mean. Typically when we run a command such as ls, it functions for us, or cd, we'll go into the temp2 directory because it's clean. It functions for us, it's a one-time, one-off command. ls, no problem, we still have our bad command.shell here. However, often we need to run multiple commands. The bash interpreter, the bash environment, supports running multiple commands, known as command chaining, on a single command line, which also functions from within scripts. Let's show you what we mean. Let's say, for example, we wanted to run pwd to print the working directory, and we'd also like to echo hello world for whatever reason. This illustrates the concept of two or more commands. So we'll execute pwd, and you simply delimit using a semicolon the two commands, the two or more commands. It's that simple to perform command chaining. And if you'd like, you can separate the second command by a space. It's totally optional. So we'll instruct the shell to initially run pwd, and then after pwd we want it to echo hello world. So two commands will run here. One will echo on the first line, or one will print its results. In other words, echo the results of the print working directory on the first line. Echo world will echo hello world on the second line. So that's echo hello world will end up on the second line. Let's try it. So as you can see here, pwd returned our location within the directory on the first line, and the echo returned its value on the second line. Often you'll see this here that you have new mail. This is because I have tons of mail unchecked on the system. You can ignore the third line. If we were to rerun the same command sequence, you would not see you have new mail. Every X number of commands you have new mail, especially when you open a new shell like we've just done, tends to pop up. So that's command chaining. Now let's show you some more sophisticated examples. Let's clear the screen, and we want to, instead of typing on new lines, which can be tedious, after we've cleared the screen, we want to print the working directory. We'd then like to echo hello world. And this time we're illustrating command chaining without the need for separating spaces between the semicolon and the subsequent command. So we've cleared the screen successfully, printed the working directory, and echoed hello world. We can cursor up to find that command again, and we can keep appending. Let's echo something else. Semicolon, echo how is life, for example, with a question mark. This will clear the screen, print the working directory, echo hello world, and also echoed how is life. Let's look at some more sophisticated examples, or more clever examples. Let's say we'd like to change directory to the root of the file system. We'd then like to list the contents in long format of the root of the file system. We'd then like to echo that you are in a particular directory. Now here we're throwing a little curveball in. We're going to echo a variable which is always set once you're within the bash shell. It's called pwd. We showed you pwd as well as old pwd. Pwd is always set. So we're going to change directory to the root, list the contents in long format of the root, echo that you're actually in the root directory, And we can also echo anything else we'd like to, or type some other command. For example, echo time to go back home. And then finally, instruct the shell to actually take us back to the home directory. Now we're doing all this without actually clearing the screen. If we'd like to clear the screen first and you've typed a long string as you see here, or much longer, you could go on and on. A quick way to get to the beginning of the line is to type Control A. And then make your first command clear the screen and terminate it with a semicolon. Control E takes us to the end of the command stream. So what's going to happen here? First thing, clear the screen. This is quite simple, but it's more clever. And once you get the hang of it, then you'll see its usage immediately within a scripting environment. Because you can change directories, set a default, go somewhere, do something, come back to a different directory, check a process, you name it. Touch a file somewhere. We're going to clear the screen. We're going to go to the root, show me the contents, tell me to the screen or to the terminal that we're in a given directory, echo a little joke that it's time to go back home, and then actually execute the fact that we're back in the home directory. Let's do that. And it's that simple. We've listed the contents of the root directory. We've echoed that you are in this particular directory. We've echoed that it's time to go back home. And we've now returned to the home directory. We can alter this command by adding more to it, such as you are now in PWD, and this will help. And we can also add you were in old PWD, just to add some spice and to return more useful information. So we'll clear the screen, go to the root, list the contents, echo where we are, which will be then at that point in the root directory, echo time to go back home, change to the home directory using tilde expansion, as specified by the tilde, which equates to the home directory, echo that you're now in PWD, which is the home directory, /root for the root user, and this applies to all users, and echo that we were in a specific directory. Let's try that. Excellent. Oh, we forgot to put the E here, so let's do it just to be grammatically correct. So we've listed the contents, listed where we were, time to go home, we're now in root, but we were at the root of the file system. So command chaining is pretty neat. That's how you make use of it. You just string commands together, delimited by the semicolon, and the bash interpreter is smart enough to understand that they're separate commands. Now these commands are being run serially. They're not being run in parallel. That's something else for you to know, that the commands actually run one after the other. So clear runs first, and then cd to the root, and then lsl, and then echo you are in PWD, etc. This is a serial process, so you need to think about that when you're designing your scripts, that if you employ command chaining, that you may end up processing serially instead of in parallel. And of course, if you're processing large chunks of data, that could impact your performance. Excellent. So now that you understand command chaining, let's show you how command lists work. It's quite simple. You understand exit statuses. You know that 0 means good. So an exit status of 0 is desirable for most programs. Simply echo at any time the question mark. You'll find it. And it's set in your environment. So you can grep for question mark. Now, you know that this is set. Excellent. The variable is available. You know that it's set. So let's show you how to do command lists. So we can command chain. That's quite simple. Just delimit all of your commands by semicolons. It applies to scripts as well. How about command lists? Now let's show you some of the logic that's premised on both of what we just showed you, command chaining as well as exit statuses. Let's say we'd like to run the ls command with the long format, but then we'd like to run pwd, which is print working directory. When you use ampersand, the second command, in this case which is pwd, will only execute if the first command, LSL, returned an exit status of 0. So in other words, the first command needs to be successful. So when you employ command lists, you need to know that if you use ampersands, two ampersands represents ANDing. And when you AND by running two commands, the left needs to be successful in order for the right to perform. This is totally employable within a scripting environment. So you can make command sets as concise as possible by employing command lists. Let's show you what we mean. LSL is going to return an exit status of 0 because ls is a valid command and the -l, the lowercase -l, is a valid argument. So therefore PWD will run. Excellent. We have an LSL and we have PWD. It's that simple. Let's try it again. We'll LSL and PWD. And you can spice this up. You can, for example, say echo, you are now in PWD. That'll work. Echo, you are now in, and remember Linux is case sensitive. So LSL, you are now in root temp 2. Let's show you the converse to ANDing, which is called ORing or ORs. Now what will happen is we'll alter this, and instead of two ampersands we'll use two pipes. The pipe is typically located right beneath the backspace key. The second command when you employ ORing when using command lists will only execute if the first command has failed. So in other words, because LSL or ls-l is a good command, the second command will fail. Let's show you that in action. As you can see here, echo you are now in PWD did not execute because ls-l returned a 0 status. So we have two ways to run commands in command lists mode. We can use ANDing, or we can use ORing. It's up to you. One depends on the successful status of the first command. The other depends on the unsuccessful status of the first command. Let's show you it in action. We'll pass into ls the Z option, which we've tested before. We know it does not exist. Now because the first command failed, echo you are now in PWD succeeded. So the first failed, second succeeded, and the first example both ran. Now in the first example, let's say the second command were a bad command, it would still run. It would just return a bad error. So for example, LSL, let's clear screen. LSL will work. But now we're going to do LSZ, which is not a good command. It'll still work because the second is premised on the exit status of the first. That's all that it's premised on. So the exit status of the first is quickly passed into the bash interpreter, which makes a decision. So because the first ran, it ran the second. In the case of ORing, because the first did not run, it ran the second. So in this case, ls-z is not a good option, but it actually ran because ls-l did run. So that's all there is to command chaining as well as command lists. Command chaining simply delimit your commands using semicolons. You can add a space if you'd like and just watch them run. We'll clear screen, we'll LSL, it runs. Just simply delimit all the commands you want with semicolons. And command lists, you have two options. You can use ampersand or you can use pipes. In this case, the first command has to fail for the second to run. Now this information is critical within your scripts, so try to grasp what we're doing here pretty quickly so that when we use it in the scripts you're totally comfortable.